Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Kingdom of Dreams podcast, The Making of Stories. I'm your host, Joe Otnier. Today, my guest is Julie Berghoff. She is an art director, and she served as an art director on the Apple TV hit series, The Studio, with Seth Rogen, which has already been commissioned for season 2. And we really had a great conversation about her work in on this kind of production where there's a lot of runners, a lot of long take, and how she creates that world in that context as opposed to being, close-ups and cutaways, and you can move the set around here and there. But in this particular case, it was very, very different. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Julie. Enjoy. You love the series, The Studio. I remember when I saw the trailer. I mean, I'm in the industry, so it's very, very relevant and very, very, kind of you were able to relate to it. But um,
hmm
really amazing series, and your job as a production designer in something like that, where there's never-ending takes, must have been very, very interesting.
it was, when I read scripts, I don't know. I've always kind of tried to do long oneers as a production designer in my mind with the way I build things so that it
Mm,
gives directors options, you know what I mean? Because,
right.
and maybe I wasn't even, because I don't think completely like a DP. I think in movement through a space. But yeah, that was an early on discussion and it definitely influenced the way that I built the interior offices for sure. Um, but I do love to do two-story builds for that reason. A lot of my sets are two-story builds. Like my first big build was like the Conjuring house. That was a two-story build. And also options to look downstairs because I think I mean, in filmmaking, we want to be surprised. We want, everything has a story behind the story. So with the studio, it was like, okay, these executive offices I almost wanted everyone to be able to see each other. And then if you were on the second floor, you could look down on the first floor and watch people. And that was actually something that Seth had referenced when we were designing it. He was like, yeah, there was so many times when I'd be sitting in the lobby and the CEO would like look over down on me. He said it was so intimidating and scary. So I think, it's like I just try to be open and take in as much as I can and then just inject it into the design and hopefully it works for everybody.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the things I loved about it, right? I mean, there are 10 episodes. We can talk about one or two or all, but just to kind of, you talked about The Office, that there's you are able to, normally when you're working on a TV show or even movie, like you'll have, even if it's one building in the film, it may be different locations, different sound stages,
hmm
give and take. But here, the environment was all 360, and you would know whose office is where in respect to the stairs and where's the meeting room, and that's something that really I find kind of pulls the audience out. I think if it's not there, that's just me personally,
Oh,
and
interesting.
seeing that three-dimensional space, like where everybody sits and you are there with them, right? If the office of the CEO was next door, if he or she is listening on. And there was a scene like that when somebody was walking by. I think it was the first or second episode. One of the characters was freaking out, and I think it was I don't think it was Seth Rogen's character, but the his best
Is it
friend.
Ike?
Yeah,
Ike?
he
Yeah.
walks by and he's like, "Oh, what are you up to?" So it does a lot of stuff in the film, in the series, that people don't realize, but it does make a big difference.
Well, thanks for sharing that with me. For me, it was also just like there's so much like inner kind of stories in, like the assistants are the ones who know everything. It's almost like the valet. So it was like putting the assistants outside their offices, then they can almost see what the other assistants are doing, which is kind of like it bleeds into also the scripts of like them watching each other or Quinn stealing the keys off of one and because knowing every movement. And then for me it was like putting the CEO at the end was allowing him to look over everybody, like literally he could see into the conference rooms, he could see into the offices, he could see even down to the lobby area near the fountain. And so it was intentional when I was designing it that it was built like that.
Yeah, no, and it shows. So again, like, when you watch a movie or it's the production as a whole or show that makes it the way it is. If it works, it's not just because it's good script or good casting or good cinematography, but the environment which everything is taking place. I know most of the time it gets very much overlooked by people unless it's like film like Gladiator or some period piece. So yeah, I just wanted to convey my thank you to be so immersive and involved with and getting your audience involved in that. I love the series. I absolutely love the series.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you had a good time. It is very fun. People say, "Oh, it's super stressful." And for me, a 102, the oneer, I saw it like three times in a row, and I was like, "Wow, yeah, it's so it's a testament to Adam Newport Barra and Seth and Evan and everyone for how we choreographed that. We scouted the house. We really thought about every location is an interesting scout. Like they read the scripts and we walk through the space. First when we back this up, first I pick it for like story, like character, aesthetics, what does it say? And as Seth talks about, and a lot of he talks about how, when he went to go visit uh um like for Patty, the first time we see her, she's in this house that's literally almost has a 360 of Los Angeles, and she's into architecture and fashion and the arts like period. And so it was really trying to find those special locations that would identify, kind of connect to each character. So Kelly Lynch was very gracious to allow us to shoot in her house, which is on top of the world over in the Griffith Park area. And it literally, I've never seen a view like that. It was when we were scouting, a lot of times there was more people than usual because I think everyone was just in awe with all of our locations. It was like an architectural tour of LA. And we shot in three John Lautner houses, and that's kind of a dream for any production designer to shoot in one. So I feel really blessed to have been allowed in all three of these homes, and I think that they connected really well with each character and each story point. The oneer being, it was very courageous of Adam, our DP, to want to shoot in that house because it was all glass. And as you know, it was really hard for him to get the light consistent for the days we were there. But he mastered that. And then Seth's character, Matt, living in the smaller of the Lautner houses, but it was so quirky and so Seth. Like, the main thing Seth always wants is like, beautiful architecture, but a good coffee machine and like and just clean lines, and that house has it. It's almost like a boat, that house. It's incredibly built, and every piece of the house has like a purpose. And that's the thing I love about architects from like mid-century and pre-mid-century is they really studied the earth and the light, and they used a lot of natural materials, and their color palette also leaned in that direction. And that's kind of what we did on the studio. We just really looked at the history of Hollywood, what the history of Los Angeles and filmmaking, and we just really, I think, try to touch as much of that as possible and bring that into all the scripts.
Yeah, no, and you talked about the locations, right? Obviously, the locations do make a difference, but again, going back to the story and the script, you notice the locations and the architect and the production design for a little bit. I'm just speaking for myself, but
Okay.
because the characters are so cool and so relatable, even if you're not a movie executive, maybe I related to it. You forget about everything around it, right? Like you're just in that world, in that space. You appreciate
That's
the
cool.
architect and production design, but you move on from it because the story is being served and everything else is around it, which I found really, really cool. Yeah, no, you guys did a fantastic job. I can't wait for season two. I really can't. It's gonna be exciting.
Me too. I was like, are we gonna make the Kool-Aid movie for real?
In 2004, I did a student film and it was called Passion of Jim. It was literally over the top comedy about a filmmaker who thinks he's Spielberg, but he's not. And everybody in the crew is just over the top, but it's just one of those that's
That's
one of the
funny.
things I appreciated that because maybe it brought that back up, but overall it was really, really, really well done and scripted. And my wife and I were watching the last episode 2 days ago, and she said it's crazy how all these characters mess up everything, but somehow in the end they conquer it all, right? Which which is lovely to see and hear.
And I mean, it's just real life. I mean, it is sometimes, I
Yeah,
think Seth even quotes like people in film somehow fail upwards. But and I just loved how much this show is about filmmaking and the passion for filmmaking. And
yeah,
all of us are passionate filmmakers or film admirers or love film in some aspect. You don't have to make film to love it.
yeah.
And at the end when they're all cheering on movies, it's like that's something in our hearts as filmmakers that we've all been cheering for because of I love doing television. It's also a big part of my life. And there's a lot of, storytelling that can evolve in television, but doing a feature is that's where we all started, or, in longer format. And it makes me realize how difficult it is to tell a good story in an hour and a half, and do it
Yeah.
well. And the thing that happened on this show was that everyone was so cohesive, starting with the writing. And then, I'm usually one of the first people on, and Cameron in costumes. She and Seth had talked about a really earth tony color palette, and that influenced, my color palette inside. I mean, we were already leaning into Frank Lloyd Wright, but every single person kind of added to it, lighting, and working with Russell Iyer and Adam, and how he wanted to move the camera through the space and through all the spaces. And we just kind of like were really cohesive and sharing, and that's what filmmaking is. It's like this, we're all adding to this part of making something, and it is kind of stressful along the way, but I mean it's also like a creative energy stress. Like everyone talks about anxiety, that it's such a bad thing, but anxiety actually can be something that like spurs you forward. It's a creative energy. It doesn't it's it creates magic. And
It
that's
does.
and that's and that's what I think we all contributed and added and our magic and that I think is, I mean, obviously Seth and Evan are our leaders and the writers. We're also really there every day, and everyone just added their magic, and I think that's why the show shines so brightly.
Couldn't have said it better. And you talked about passion for movies, even if you're not in the business and you're a moviegoer. There's this, I don't want to name his name. He works at Apple at a really high position, and I communicated with him a few times, and we were very kind of like, when you talk to each other the first few times, you're just kind of reserved and everything. And this 3 weeks ago, I was in California, in San Francisco, and there was an event, and he was there, and there was this awkward thing, and all of a sudden, I discovered that he loves movies, and all gloves were off, and it was just like we became two completely different individuals because of that share of love for movies. Yes, I'm in the business, but that doesn't matter because he loves movies. We were talking about the movies from the 90s, the directors, the music composers, the art directors, all of that stuff. So it's true that I don't know about you, but definitely for me, when I start talking about movies, I'm a completely different person as I am right now. But
Mm.
but in other cases, not that I'm not different, but you have to be serious about life and take things a little bit differently. There's personal stuff, but movies really brings out the best in people, I think, and stories, even books, I think. It's just one of those things.
I mean, it derives from there, right? I mean, I think it's an opportunity. It's like music, right? Music and movies can bring you back to a moment,
True.
and we can connect through a moment that we've shared even separately from someplace far away. And then we can also be vulnerable, we can laugh, we can cry. And so if all those emotions can, I mean, it's just like that can connect you to a complete stranger in the middle of anywhere. You know what I mean?
100%.
Like the airport or anything. So I find that that's really cool that you have that experience. And like, I think we just have to keep remembering that, and, and, um, and praying that movies continue to be made.
They will. They will. And great movies and entertaining movies and fun movies continue to be made
Mm.
of all genres. Speaking of that, let's go back in time. What I was going through your IMDb, and please correct me because sometimes IMDb is wrong. Most of the
Mm.
time, it has been wrong about a lot of people. You worked on Saw, you worked on a bunch of other TV shows. What was that moment in life where you decided that this is what you want to do? That bug? Was it a film? Was it a theater play? What started it all?
Um, well, I mean, I didn't know about filmmaking probably until my early 20s. I was living in Chicago. I'd gone to art school, and I met this model builder who was like making these oversized like Snickers bars for TV commercials because Chicago is a big advertising city. And I was like, what is that? That is so cool. And I was a sculptor and did fashion and multiple things, and I just was hooked. I just was like, this is the coolest thing. So I actually started as a model builder, and my favorite, I was making like oversized mini wheats and peanuts and sculpting them and Happy Meals toys and stuff like that. And so like I started as a mold maker, caster, working in kind of like a specialty, and then I did this Coca-Cola commercial that was stop motion animation, and I was like hooked. I was like, wow, this is the coolest thing. So I really wanted to do stop motion animation for years, and I moved to Oregon to work. At the time before it was Leica, it was Will Vinton Studios, and I worked there and helped develop this series called the PJs that had Eddie Murphy on it. And it was
Mm-hmm.
a brilliant, brilliant show. And I was sad when it went down because it was so raw and edgy. It was like Nightmare Before Christmas went sideways, and took place in the ghetto. And I did that for like over a year, and then I came down to Hollywood to try to see if I could, do what's next. And there wasn't a lot of stop motion in Hollywood, but I found my way, and my first like production design job in Hollywood was the Kenny Rogers Christmas show.
Mm.
So, and then I traveled with him all through like the Grand Ole Opry, and it was very theater, so it was like, I painted a backing and like, worked with all these guys, and we would set it up every night. And it was really just, I realized that I loved to work with my hands. I loved every aspect of painting, and I could draw, and somehow architecture and all that stuff just came kind of like naturally to me, even though I didn't go to school for it. I just really understood building
Sure,
and
sure.
some just like past life situation. I don't know. And I just from there, like just worked in commercials for years, which was a great platform for learning because you don't have a chance to go back and get anything. You have to get it all out of the gate. And it really taught me to design quickly on my feet, and I did every job like so. There everyone has their different way of getting where they are. I would say that I'm like the master of many things, or what's the word, what's the terminology? I'm good at
Master of all, something of none. What was it? Yeah.
I don't I don't know if that's a compliment, but I do little for myself. I do little mini dissertations of every project I step into, so it's like I like from the old man, I learned about, America and Afghanistan in the 80s, and had to recreate, Afghanistan villages, and on the studio I had to research the big five and the history of filmmaking, and I knew it, but I didn't really know it, and so then I was rewatching, Alfred Hitchcock and Buster Keaton and, screwball comedies. And I just, I had to do it in a super condensed time, which was very stressful because I was like, wow, who gets the opportunity to design an entire history of a movie studio? Like, I was like, me, right on. So, that was, that's kind of my approach to things. I really want to know everything I can about other people who've done it or the history of something. And I want to try to stay as true to something, like I did a movie in 2022 called The Stranger's Case, which was about the Aleppo War and in Syria. And I never really knew that much about Syria and the Middle East, and I had to do a refugee camp in Turkey, and people like Syrian refugees came up to me and they were crying, and they were like, this is exactly what it was like. And I was like, okay, I don't know if that's a good thing, because it was so
Yeah.
heartbreaking to see how people were living, So I I want to be authentic to the whatever project I'm working on and whatever aspect of it, and also give like put my heart and soul into it, and like hopefully I'm not hopefully I'm doing the right thing and giving people great actors a great place to like kind of jump off from, to feel that they're in the environment that I've built, that can connect to their character and elevate their character.
Makes perfect sense. And you were before you even talked about stop motion, as you were talking about being in Chicago and seeing things being built, the first thing that came to my mind is shouldn't you be working with Aardman? And then you talked about stop motion because I love Wallace and Gromit, Chicken Run, and Shaun of the
Yeah.
Sheep. I mean, they're like the masters. It's jack of all trades, master of none, by the way. They're the masters of that. So have you ever considered, because DreamWorks in early 2000s or late 90s teamed up with Aardman for a couple of films, The Curse of the Were Rabbit, Wallace and Gromit, and Chicken Run. Was that ever a thought in your head, or even now, like maybe I need to be there?
um I mean, I would never say never. Like Michael Johnson did, was it Caroline, I
Yes,
think,
yes,
right?
Caroline.
So
Yeah,
I worked with Michael on the PJs because there was like 10 directors that were dipping in and out. And it's just such a particular medium, and I think you almost have to be living in that medium to really get back into
yeah,
it, like, and it's like London is really where most of that is happening, and so but it would be, I'm always like, asking my agent, like, are there any scripts floating around with stop motion animation, because I would love to do it again. It was I did look at everything in a miniature world after when I was working on the PJs, and afterwards, like, you're like, oh, can I turn that thimble into a lamp? Like, you start to think like in this really weird way, look at everything if you can modify it, because it did have to have like it was like in a low budget. It was lots of craftsmen and people and incredible artists, like from, the builders, the sculptors of the characters, to the set builders, to the animators, to the voices. It was really, again, everyone adding their magic to it to make it happen. And I feel like it's still out there and still happening, but probably just like, it's its own little world.
yeah.
And
I mean,
yeah,
Tim Burton has done quite a few, right? Nightmare Before Christmas, Frank and Winnie. I think he produced James and the Giant Peach, if I'm not mistaken, if my
he
memory
did.
serves.
Yeah,
Yeah, so and I think there's a lot of now animations kind of evolving, right? I mean, you see Spider-Verse, and even though it's not stop motion, I do think that there is more because there's just something about. I even made a short with it. I teamed up. I directed like this short, like 2 minute stop motion. There's just something about it, that feel, that texture, that you're actually building something from the scratch and you're taking a photograph. As tedious as it is, but it's just one of those most rewarding feelings, I think. And then for you to be able to do that at some point in more depth, that would be really, really cool, I think.
yeah. I'm open. If there's anyone out there who wants a, designer who loves stop motion animation, I'm available.
Yeah, and you also talked about Aleppo and Syrians and refugee camps. It's right here, this poster. Where is it? This
Oh
one.
yeah. Yeah.
Citizen of Moria. That was a feature documentary I directed inside an actual in Afghanistan and in a refugee camp
Oh
slash
wow.
detention center in Greece. And I know that feeling that you're talking about because you almost feel guilty for being there. Like here I am, in my proper attire and able to eat 3 meals or 2 meals properly, and here there are people, you know what I mean? Like it's just such a bizarre thing. But if they related to you, they said to you that you created something that reflected their home, that's the greatest compliment you can get in the most bizarre situation. I do get that.
Well, they were also like extras in the love of filmmaking. You know what I mean? So it's just like
Yeah.
so interesting how they would inject themselves back into an environment that was probably PTSD, and just because they love filmmaking and also want their stories to be told. It was a beautiful project to work on, to like tell, like to learn about the Aleppo War, to learn what the people went through, to work in the Middle East. I was in Amman, Jordan for I think 2 months, maybe 3 months, and then in Turkey, and it was a really beautiful experience.
I'm supposed to shoot a film in Oman, 70% of the film, in the next couple of months, so that would be interesting.
Ah. Oh, good luck. There's really great people there. And
Yeah.
um, I was introduced to, it was during Ramadan, and that was tricky to film during holidays and things, but I was invited into a few of their, ceremonies, and brought to the mosque with women. And it was like, it's memories I'll have forever of such beautiful people. Yeah.
Amazing. What year were you there?
2022.
Oh, so just very recently, not too long
Yeah,
ago.
very recently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Awesome. That's really cool. Let's come back to the studio. What I'm always fascinated by people's journey because, we don't think about that more often. I find like, what did you do on this film? Okay, that's great, but how did you get here? That's why I asked you that long kind of question slash answer because I'm just very
Sure.
fascinated with that. Back to studio. What was in any of the episodes? You can just pick one or two. What was the most difficult thing or challenging thing, I would say, to do in terms of, the camera movement or whether it was trying to get a certain look, but it wasn't getting there? And how did you and your team overcome that?
Um, I wish that I could have given, I mean, the hardest two sets were the executive office and the Golden Globes. And both of those, the reason why they were so hard was time.
Mm,
Mostly. They wanted to film the executive offices first, and usually your set builds are on the end. So I designed that in like 2 to 3 weeks, and we built it and decorated it in seven, really,
wow.
including set designing it. And it was I wish that DP didn't come on as early enough in the prep, so I was pretty far along in the design when he came, and then he needed a lot of modifications of the set to be able to do his to use
Lighting. Yeah.
more of the shots. It was
Okay.
more moving the camera because of the way that they were going to use the little mini cranes and then pass the camera and keep it continuous shots. So I was like, I was cutting into the set to give them, to like have walls move and things like that. So that was tricky, because the executive offices were built on an 18-inch block. So if you changed anything, it changed everything. So that was really tricky, and there was a big scramble as we were set designing it and building it to redraw the doorways and things like that. But my team was incredible at just they understood what it was. It was just, and also just time. So we laser cut pieces, we CNC'd pieces, and we also cast pieces to get those blocks. So we were using all three methods so that we would be able to get it done on time. And
Wow.
and also I like plaster a lot. That's kind of one of my little secrets that I use in almost everything because it has depth and you can mix color into it. I cut out paint by tinting all of the plaster and adding different colors and things to the plaster to be want finished. So then all we did was seal it and we didn't like paint on top of it. So that also helped because usually you're painting for 2 or 3 weeks on a set like that.
Sure.
But and the other one was the Golden Globes. We had no time. We had 12 hours to decorate the outside and 3 days to decorate the inside, everybody, including lighting. And those are huge spaces and very important, intricate spaces. So basically, I treated it like a theater set. and I pre-built everything in the mill, and we worked with the gaffer Russell Iyer, and we like pre-lit everything and tested everything and got the color temperature and worked with my scenic to get like the alabaster paint job. Like she painted all that. And because I was like, oh, alabaster is probably gonna be really expensive. Like, and so, we're always hacking everything or like, figuring out how
Of
can we make it
course.
look like that without spending that kind of money. So it was just really we almost rehearsed how to load in for the outside, and we built a little scale model, and we all stood around and talked about how to shoot it, how to light it, and who was going where. And so like every step gets us closer to getting there, and not having time made us do so much, work ahead of time to get everyone aligned so that it would just flow. And it did. It just everyone, just the outside of it was so fun to do, and I was so proud of everyone and all the materials we learned used, and I learned a lot about how to do a variety show. I've never done a variety show. And I'd spoken to the designer who does the Golden Globes, and he was like, do everything neutral and lots of light and shiny things. I was like, okay. So those were the two challenging ones. And also to make it look real inside was hard because we couldn't, have 1,500 people. We had 500 people, which was already huge for Cami
Yeah.
to dress 500 people. And she just killed it. Like she's amazing costume designer. And anyway, so and hair and makeup, like, I can't say enough about Vanessa Price, like with Catherine Hahn's, hair, and I know I'm going off on other people, but
No, no, no,
it was
you're
just
fine.
it was really just, sometimes I get to know people as the show goes on because I don't spend as much time on set because I'm before camera, at camera for like just to say, hi, here it is, hope you love it, and then I'm off, so, as time went on, I got to know everyone, obviously, especially hair and makeup, I don't get to know as well. And when I saw Catherine Hahn like swinging her ponytail I think 102 with Ron Howard, and like she was almost like using it as a pointer, I was dying. It just again, she elevated, she gave Catherine Hahn something to use as a prop almost. And I just have so much mad respect with how their process, and I learned so much from them watching them on this show.
Yeah, no, that's amazing because, again, we've talked about this all the time. It's a collaborative effort, right? And everybody, you plan so much, but there's always something on the set that goes completely according to not according to the plan. And then you kind of improvise and maybe you add your own little flavor, like the example you gave. No, that's really, really cool. What's your favorite episode, if any?
Um, I would probably, it's funny, like I like two episodes. Well, I love the pilot. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so tight and it's so cool. And I loved I loved when Bryan Cranston, I just loved the whole thing with Bryan Cranston in the beginning, and then when Scorsese is talking about how the movie he wants to make, and Seth's like the red drink, it's just hilarious. Visually for me, the Golden Globes was probably my favorite because it was so elegant and beautiful, and Zoe Kravitz cracked me up with her, and Seth, he like literally made me cry at the end when he was in the limousine by himself. Like that episode was the most emotional for me. Like I was really like, oh, he went home after the awards and they won. It was really, and that's real. People sometimes are connected with people at work, and sometimes their passion just it's separates them somehow, and he's the boss, and like he starts, he's realizing, that being the boss isn't everything it's meant to, chalked up to be. So that one I think was probably my favorite episode. And
Yeah.
South, Ike
Yeah.
Barnuts is hilarious. He's hilarious on set. He's such a big personality, and it was just hilarious to see, him getting all that acknowledgement, and getting teased the whole episode. And I loved how when Seth goes and talks to Ted Sarandos in the bathroom, it's just, and all those, Seth will say like these are all like real moments that he just didn't know for sure if Ted would go for it. And he was like so, he was like, oh yeah, I'll do it. And we had to like recreate those scenes for his schedule. And so, but it paid off. Like I don't think anyone knew that we were somewhere else and not at the Golden Globe. I mean, not at the Hilton. So
Yeah. Which you mentioned Ted because that when in that episode there was 3 or 4 times you see him on the screen, and my wife is like, "Oh, he's," and I'm like, "No way! They probably just got this from stock footage and they played it on the screen." And then boom, he shows up, and I was shocked too because I did not expect him to be in there, which makes it extra special, which really makes it extra special.
and I really, all the cameos were, I think, really stressful for the guys to get. Like there was all, we were like, who are we getting? And we were like, maybe this person, maybe that person. And it really, that says a lot about, Point Grey and James Weaver, Seth and
Yeah,
Evan for like being able to pull that kind of talent in Hollywood. And I think it was just like literally that everyone getting to play themselves or a different side of themselves. It's, that, Ron Howard, throwing his hat and throwing a temper tantrum. I don't, he's Opie. He doesn't get to be a dick, so
yeah,
so it was really, as as a filmmaker, also just it was really, I really connected to all the scripts, and it was really fun for me to create all these little vignettes. Also, like the cabin in the woods and the zombie world and Chinatown. I mean, it's not very often that you get to dip into so many different genres in one show.
yeah. No, it's really cool, and I thought Ron Howard and Scorsese were the best cameos, not because they were Ron Howard or Scorsese, but the whole thing with Ron Howard episode, the last 30 minutes of the film that he makes, and everybody's raving about it, and then they go in private and they're bashing it, and which is Hollywood, which is how movie business is. I mean, I guess it was a little over the top, and Scorsese just, making our Kool-Aid movie and how his script was bought off for 10 million and yeah, and he talks about the irony with that for me was I don't know how many people know that how I'm not a fan of superhero movies with all due respect, and I think he made a comment that they're not cinema, and then he was making a Kool-Aid movie which kind of contradicted to his his actual beliefs. So I thought that was really really cool too. No, it's all in all, Julie, it's awesome series, and I really appreciate you working on it. What's next for you? If there's anything that you can talk about.
I'm on a film right now with Nick Stoller. I worked with him on Neighbors and 5 Year, and it's great to be reconnected with him. See, I worked on, the studio, and then I see Nick. I haven't seen him in years, and it's really about connecting again. Like you're on a flow with people, and then you kind of go your separate way. Sometimes it's hard to get back. So anyway, so I'm working on that. I'm on here. I'm here for 3 more weeks. It's been an amazing experience, and then season two. We're going to start back up in the fall. And so I'm looking for something in between, either commercials or something small, waiting to go back and work with everyone again.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. Yeah, that you talked about it really goes their separate ways. I saw this interview of Kevin Bacon on Howard Stern, and it's something that I've always thought about too, and I couldn't believe he actually said that. He's like, it really bothers me that, you work with people for 5, 6 months and you're like the best of buddies and then everybody disappears.
Spears, yeah.
Like nobody stays in touch. Like it's very rare, which something I wonder about too. Like how is that possible? Like you spend so much time and then you're gone. And then you reconnect maybe at another production or see somebody at a party or an event. Yeah, it's weird how that works, but it is the way it is.
I mean, we're kind of dysfunctional circus, right? Because we come
Yeah.
together, we almost put up a tent, we work crazy hours, then we take the tent down and we kind of go our and I mean my work the people I work with, I've been working on and off with for, over a decade. So like they do become your second family, and sometimes you need a break from your family.
100 that I agree with. But then to be completely disappeared is another interesting discussion to have why people do that. But it is the way that it works, and that's because it's also because you disappeared too because you get involved with somebody else, something else, like some other project. So all in all, everybody's as long as we're all getting work, that's all that matters, and we're telling stories.
I think that there always be a special connection with people when you make a project, and no matter if it's successful or not. And there's great memories with that or horrible memories that you're like, sometimes the projects are really hard and you
Yeah.
don't want to think about it. But with if I would, I can't imagine with Kevin Bacon being a star. Like sometimes I feel like we don't want to bother them. You know what I mean? Because they are probably bothered by so many people, and maybe that also is the opposite of what they need. Like staying closer to the people they work with, who are a safer place or something that they know. But
Yeah.
I mean, I know working with big Hollywood stars, like I don't even have a picture of Seth and I together. Like I don't know why I don't ask him for like a photo, which is just like you feel like everywhere we go, people are always asking him, and he always gives up photos with people. So I'm almost like, oh, maybe he gets asked too much. I'm not even gonna go there.
Yeah, because I think what that does is, I'm guessing maybe that's the reason you're not doing it because you're working with him professionally, right? And
Yeah.
then there's that, if that fandom kind of kicks in, as much as he would love to do it, but it kind of changes something. I think it may change something between two people. Unless you're really close
Yeah.
friends, that's different, right?
I think it's just I just feel like it's he's very generous with his time with his fans, and I work with him. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah, yeah.
But the next one, on the next premiere, I'm getting one.
You should do something where he asks you, "Can I take a picture with you?"
Yeah, I'll make a cutout of him like
Yeah, no, no, I get it. Awesome, Julie. This has been great. Listen, I would love to talk to you again about your next production and definitely season two, whenever that comes up. I'm guessing probably next year or later next year, but
Yep.
looking forward to it. Thank you so much for your time and for your work. Really,
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it.
All
Really
right,
love the
so nice
story.
to meet you. All right, good luck with your film in the fall.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
All
it.
right, take care.
Take care. Bye
Bye.
bye.